All right. Welcome to the healthiest half hour-ish anywhere on the internet today. Hi, I am the weight loss champion, Chuck Carroll, and this is the Exam Room Live brought to you by the Physicians Committee. Thank you so much for joining us right here on YouTube and on Facebook. We appreciate you taking the time to get healthy with us. On tap today, we are going to be taking a look at new guidelines from the American Heart Association that would change what, how much, and even when we feed our kids. The goal here, of course, is to curb childhood obesity, but it doesn't stop there. They want to detour it all the way into adulthood. Also, the beef industry today is crying poor over the coronavirus. We'll tell you what they're saying they stand to lose. And to be talking about social distancing like you have never seen before. You can call it the gourmet cure for quarantine fatigue. Plus, heart health. What are the top red foods you should be eating to keep your ticker pumping in fine fashion? For that, we're going to be checking in with dietitian extraordinaire Lee Crosby. Indeed, the fiber queen is here to talk heart health. Lee, looking forward to catching up with you.
Glad to be here, Chuck.
But before we get into any of that fun, let's get a check on the headlines. These are the 5 things that you need to know for Tuesday, May 12th, 2020. We start with a look at the coronavirus by the numbers. The death toll in the U.S. now surpassing 80,000, and that accounts for more than 1 out of every 4 COVID-19 related deaths globally. The total number of cases now stands at more than 1.3 million, although the rate of new infections has slowed overall in recent days. Doctors are coming to grips with another casualty of the pandemic, one whose reach extends far beyond just the coronavirus. The number of life-saving organ transplants is down dramatically, down by as much as 50% in the U.S. and a whopping 90% in France. The study published in the medical journal Lancet finds concerns over potential infection loom large with transplant recipients receiving immunosuppressant medication. As an example, kidney transplants are seeing the steepest declines. As of March, more than 112,000 Americans were waiting for an organ to become available. And the beef industry says it is taking a major hit from the COVID-19 pandemic. The National Cattlemen's Beef Association says the economic toll from the virus is massive, with losses of more than $13.5 billion stretching into next year. Many of the nation's meat processing plants have been struggling to maintain production due to outbreaks among employees. Meanwhile, millions have been turning to plant-based alternatives during the pandemic due to meat shortages at stores, concerns about their own health, and being wary of possible coronavirus contamination. In other news, there is good news for football fans who may be breathing a sigh of relief today. The nation's top infectious disease expert says it is feasible that the NFL season will kick off in the fall. But Dr. Anthony Fauci tells NBC Sports that fans will likely be watching the games from home, as they will likely be played in empty stadiums or with just a fraction of seats being sold to allow for social distancing. In related news, Major League Baseball is targeting July for opening day after delaying the start of the season last month. And I know that will bring our colleague Noah Kaufman tidings of great joy. And finally, how is this for fancy social distancing? A restaurant in Amsterdam is planning on serving 4-course dinners to diners in tiny greenhouses along the waterfront to prevent the spread of the coronavirus. Now, these plant-based dishes will arrive at tables on a long wooden plank to allow for appropriate distancing between diners and servers, who will also likely be wearing face shield. Reservations are sold out already through June, and dinner, by the way, will set you back about $100. I love that idea. I mean, look at how gorgeous that is along the waterfront and these tiny little greenhouses getting a 4-course gourmet plant-based dinner. I mean, does it get any better than that? I don't think so. Lots still to come here on the Exam Room Live, including a look at new guidelines and recommendations for parents to help curb the obesity epidemic among children and then well into their adulthood. Something near and dear to my own heart, and definitely something that we're going to be looking forward to diving into. But first, for years now, heart disease has been the #1 killer in the U.S., and it is now also one of the leading comorbidities in the COVID-19 crisis. In fact, in New York, cardiovascular ailments overall account for 3 of the top 10 underlying conditions in COVID-related deaths. The great news, though, is that eating a healthful plant-based diet can prevent and sometimes even reverse these conditions. So let's talk about this, the food that fuels the old heart in the best ways possible. And to even take it a step further, since it is the heart, why not talk about red foods to help improve your heart function? And for that, we welcome to the show the fiber queen. She is here to talk heart health, dietitian from the Barnard Medical Center, Lee Crosby. Lee, this all seems to go together so very well, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And the nice thing here is, again, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. If it's good for the heart, it's probably good for COVID and for diabetes and. So yeah, it's win-win all around.
And so let's talk about, we talked so much about dark colored foods and the health benefits that come from them. Red foods, certainly no exception.
Absolutely not. Yeah, they have a lot of different health benefits. Again, anything that's deeply colored, as you mentioned, is going to be good for you. The exception here would be red meat. We might just pass on that. But otherwise, yeah, and the reason this is so important, again, not just in terms of overall health, but in terms of COVID-19, is we really need to keep our heart and blood vessels healthy in case we do get the disease. And again, this is actually an analogy I had first brought out, I think maybe the very first Facebook Live episode that we did, but just to sort of bring it back to life, to really show people why this is important. Think of your arteries like highways, and your red blood cells, those cells that carry oxygen to the body, that those are like little trucks, right? And your lungs are the supply depot where they fill up. Now, if everything is going great and you're healthy and it's normal, the supply depot is functioning and the highways are open, those trucks get through just fine. Your body gets all the oxygen it needs. But if you're eating the standard American sad diet and you're not taking care of the highways, we need a little bit of, the potholes are starting to get like axle breakers and some of the lanes are closed. You can still get by if everything's okay. But man, if a tornado hits that supply depot and you can't load up your trucks like usual and you're getting half loaded trucks out on these highways with lane closures when things, there's branches down everywhere, that's a big problem. And that's just like having COVID hit your lungs, is having a tornado hit the supply depot. So, if the red blood cells or those trucks are trying to get through blood vessels that are just all blocked up, you've got big trouble. And that includes for trying to get oxygen to the heart itself, because what feeds the heart are blood vessels. And if those blood vessels have blockages already, when you start adding in the extra stress of a heart that's trying to pump extra because heart rate increases with fever, for instance, you've got major trouble. But luckily, these red foods can help us with the rest of our whole food plant-based diet open and repair those vessels. And I do want to make one more point, Chuck, that sort of circles back to what you were mentioning, is we don't just need to have a healthy heart to survive COVID. We need a healthy heart to survive, period. So I looked these stats up. According to the CDC, last year, 647,000 Americans die each year from heart disease. So again, we've had 80,000 COVID deaths, and that is horrible and tragic, but so is the number of people that we lose from heart disease, when a lot of those deaths could have been prevented and happened too early. So are you ready to talk some red foods?
Well, yeah, and I love this analogy that you used about potholes, because around here, that once winter comes, it's just the roads are just littered with them. It's just like you're dodging, you're ducking, you're weaving, just trying to keep your axles in check. But then, yeah, right. So then once the weather warms and things begin to thaw, we have something called pothole palooza. And that is where they go in and they patch all kinds of potholes. It's like a game. How many can you fill in the span of a week? And so I look at these red foods that you're going to be talking about today as our own version of pothole palooza.
I love it. That's going viral for sure. All right.
So what's on your list?
Okay, so red food number 1, red lentils. These don't get a lot of press. When's the last time you saw a headline about red lentils? But they should. Okay, first, because they're a legume and they are high in fiber. I'm the fiber queen, so it has to have, it's coming very first thing. That's good for not just keeping you regular, but also helping lower cholesterol, right? Because beans in particular, along with oats, are high in soluble fiber, that kind of fiber that acts like a sponge and soaks up the excess cholesterol that's in your gastrointestinal tract. Now, even if you're eating a plant-based diet and you're not eating extra exogenous or outside cholesterol. Your body's still making its own, and the waste cholesterol it tries to get rid of by putting it back into your gastrointestinal tract. And if you have fiber there, soluble fiber to soak it up and insoluble fiber to kind of scrub it out so it gets gone when you go to the bathroom, that's great. If you don't, you can actually end up reabsorbing your waste cholesterol, which can raise your cholesterol levels, bad for your heart. The other important thing is that lentils, along with these other legumes, help replace red meat, which we know is dangerous for your heart. Cool fact, a cup of red lentils, 18 grams of protein, a cup cooked. And the nice thing is it's really awesome for thickening stews and chilies. They cook pretty fast relative to beans, so much faster. And you can also use them to make something called dal. If you've never had that, it's an Indian comfort food dish, and it's super healthy. It uses one of our next red foods, tomatoes. And if you want to try it out, there's a great dal recipe it's a website called Vegan Richa, R-I-C-H-A. So veganricha.com, look for her turmeric spinach lentil dal. And if you want, it only has a teaspoon of oil, but you can even get rid of that by dry toasting your spices. So that's red food number one.
All right. Well. Now hold on. Let's unpack red food number one. Two things here. One,
Yes.
dal is absolutely delicious. I
It's
love
so
it.
good, right?
One of the hardest parts of being at home all of the time now is not being able to go down the street to the Indian restaurant by the office and get the dal that they have.
Sometimes you just need a buffet, and it's not happening right now.
I know, right? But two, I love the fact that you included the protein content with lentils, because that continues to be a concern for people who are just beginning to explore a plant-based diet. You know, so many people now, we've seen these studies time and again since the pandemic began. People are exploring alternatives to meat and dairy. One of the people who I was reading about just yesterday was an Olympic gymnast by the name of Ali Reisman, and she stated in this article in Women's Health that she's struggling to get enough protein with her new plant-based diet. So I love the fact that you went 18 grams of protein right there with red lentils. Good job.
Yeah, and none of the saturated fat and cholesterol that can not just harm heart health, but also performance. So just saying, if she needs more protein, hit up some lentils.
I think you said tomatoes were next on the list.
Tomatoes. Okay, so they are good for all the reasons, and we're getting ready. Tomato season. If you are a gardener, you know you're getting ready to put out your tomato plants. It's coming. Get ready. So they're high in lycopene. We all know that's a phytonutrient that it can actually potentially help lower the risk of heart attack, but it's also protective in terms of prostate, breast, and even skin cancer. That's a fun fact. Now, do we eat tomatoes raw or cooked? You'll see both ways being promoted. And my answer again to this is yes, as always, yes to raw and yes to cooked. So raw, they're going to be higher in vitamin C, which there's some evidence that not just on the heart health side, but that if you aren't getting enough, that could potentially help you if you get a respiratory virus. And also the cooked, on the flip side, are higher in that absorbable lycopene, because the lycopene hangs out inside the cells of the tomato. So when you cook them, you burst them open, and you can absorb the lycopene. And they're rich in potassium, which can help you lower blood pressure, which we know high blood pressure is not just bad for your heart. It's also bad if you catch COVID-19.
No doubt.
Tomatoes. You ready how about another one?
Yeah, bring it on.
Yes. Okay. Beets. Speaking of athletic performance. Okay. Beets. Rich in betaine, I think of it that way, but betaine can help protect the heart by helping lower homocysteine levels. If you're an athlete, beets can also help you improve your endurance and muscle recovery by partly increasing blood flow to the muscles. Now you can roast beets. You can actually grate them and put them with some Dijon mustard in a raw salad. Super tasty, just like your own little beet salad. And then Dr. Jim Loomis of Game Changers fame, and also our medical director at the Barnard Medical Center, has a game-changing recipe for beet hummus. I don't know if it's anywhere online or if you can con that out of him, but it's a really awesome recipe for beet hummus.
I've not seen that. I know that the man is a whiz in the kitchen, that we should definitely tap into that resource. I will say, one of the things that I love most, I know that you're a big salad fan. I love good, like just cubed roasted beets. Just put those in the salad as well with a whole bunch of mixed greens.
Oh, interesting.
So good. It's so good.
Full confession, I'm not a huge beet fan, but I would be willing to try roasted. I like them. And I'm telling you, if you haven't tried the raw shredded beets with the Dijon mustard in a salad, like a little kind of slaw almost kind of thing, it's surprisingly good.
Yeah, I don't know. There's so many people like beets are one of those under the radar kind of vegetables that I didn't even think about until I adopted a plant-based diet. And then lo and behold, one day a couple of years ago, I'm down in the Hampton, Virginia area visiting my mother-in-law, and she is anything but plant-based, God love her. But we went to the salad bar, and I mean, she went to town on the beets that were at the salad bar, you know?
Fantastic.
I mean, she just spoonful after spoonful. It was like two pieces of lettuce and a ton of beets.
Hey, that's cool. Whatever makes you happy. If it's a whole plant food, eat it.
Oh, she was happy. What's next?
All right, next up we have red grapes. I've talked about this before. They are always in my fridge. I love them because they're super versatile. They're anti-inflammatory. They've got fiber and they're nice and hydrating, high water content. Of course, they've got resveratrol, good for heart health, might potentially also be good in terms of helping to reduce the risk of a severe COVID outcome. You all know I love them frozen. If you haven't read the blog post I did about a dietitian's day of food in quarantine, go read that because they make an appearance as my dessert frozen. They are like sorbet bites. So good. Also, they're a great salad topping. They're practically a salad dressing all by themselves because they've got a little bit of acid and a little bit of sweetness. So it kind of covers most of the bases there. So red grapes.
You do salads in the morning. I know that you're a
I
breakfast
do.
salad fan.
Huge.
I think grapes in a breakfast salad would be fantastic.
Had that this morning, actually.
There you go. I think that your next food would also pair well with the grapes in a salad.
It does. It also does very nicely with a baby spinach salad. And this is strawberries. We have mentioned them before, but they made the list because of a couple reasons. One, again, loaded up with vitamin C intake. And we all know that antioxidant power is great. I'm sorry, loaded up with vitamin C, 141% of your daily value in a cup. So that's pretty great. They also contain a nutrient called fisetin, right? And what is that? It is a bright red pigment in the strawberry that makes it so pretty, which we all love pretty food, but it also helps to protect your blood vessels. So that's kind of a nice little piece there. And it potentially has anti-cancer and anti-aging properties. So either way, also strawberries are just delicious. Let's get real. So again, they're great on a salad. They're good in a smoothie. They're good all by themselves. And if you get ones that aren't quite there, but you know, you get what you get at the grocery store these days. If you do an equal mix of cocoa powder and like an organic powdered sugar, it's not a super health food, but it's a really nice like chocolate covered strawberry dessert.
And you know, strawberries can be hit or miss, but I'd be remiss if I didn't say that it's just almost strawberry season, you know? So we're going to get some really good strawberries in the store pretty soon.
Brace yourself. It's going to be awesome.
It is going to be epic. So what's the bottom line here with red foods and heart health? Break it on down for us.
Okay. So the red plant, obviously the red meat, push that aside. The red foods again, and this is really all the whole plant foods, but these 5 in particular are sort of rock stars when it comes to heart health, is that you can help prevent heart disease. You can help reduce your risk. And again, this isn't just heart disease. It's all the cardiovascular diseases. So basically, if you have a blood vessel that feeds it, which is every organ, these foods can help with all of those. And in some cases, they can even help reverse cardiovascular disease. So that's great news for you and for those you heart. I had to. Come on.
I love so much when you're on this show.
So cheesy.
It is
not enough.
It is plant-based cheesy. It is,
That's right.
It is just phenomenal. But in all seriousness, like I love this so much. It's so important because, you know, going back and pulling some data this morning in preparation of having you on the show, I was looking at the numbers in New York. They do a phenomenal job of just posting all of their COVID-related statistics. And really that top 10 of comorbidities, those underlying conditions with those deaths that they're experiencing up there, so many of them tie right back to the heart. So it's good to know that the first thing that you can do to start to boost your own heart health is to really start picking up some of these foods the next time you're in the store.
Yeah, actually this morning I was also doing a little more research on it. And on May 1st, there was an article published in the Journal of the American Medical Association, and it was more than twice the risk for people who went into the hospital with COVID-19. You had more than twice the risk of dying from it in the hospital if you had coronary artery disease. So that's basically disease in the vessels that feed your heart. So it could not be a better time to make these kinds of changes than now. And the other good part of that is that we're home. We don't have as many temptations in our face all the time. So it's actually, if you want to try and find a silver lining, part of it is that, hey, we have time to focus on our habits and really make some changes that can stick once we get back to normal life.
Well, I picked up on the keyword habits there, because let's turn the page and talk about some habits that are going to get established much earlier in life, all the way back to childhood. Over the weekend, I had an opportunity to reflect on my own diet growing up. And from time to time, my mom, God love her, she would try to introduce me to the idea of eating healthy food. And honestly, it usually didn't go well. I know I have a picture up there. There we are. So this is young me with my mom, and I just shunned fruits and vegetables. The expression on my face kind of says it all here. And I turned instead from this wonderful healthy platter with apples and oranges and grapes. I mean, just this great salad that Lee was just describing. I instead turned to processed fast food, and that in turn ballooned me all the way up to 420 pounds. So doctors on that diet put me on blood pressure medication, I should say, when I was still in high school, right? So I'm 5'5", maybe 5'6" on the best day, and my waist was 66 inches. And by the time I was in my mid-20s, really, I had one foot in the grave already. But did it have to be that way? Well, no. And I don't blame my mother either, right? Because she was a single parent and she was raising two children, and she was just doing the absolute best that she could. But at the end of the day, really, all roads have brought us here together today. So we now can talk about those roads that are less traveled, the healthier roads, as it were. And this past week, the American Heart Association released new guidelines for parents that will help establish healthy eating habits at an early age. And it comes at a time when more than 1 out of every 5 children over the age of 12 are obese. And that percentage continues to rise as we get older. And that is why experts say it is critical that healthier habits become established at an earlier age so that they then can last a lifetime. And the child then will be less likely to become another statistic in a preventable disease. So, Lee, as a dietitian, childhood obesity has to be a major concern. And I know that weight has also been a problem for you at one point.
Oh, yeah, no, people don't believe that because they see me now and they're like, "Wait, you were overweight as a kid?" And I'm like, "Yep, sure was. Had high cholesterol too." I mean, it was, and again, my parents were doing the very best they could, and we actually had a decent amount of healthy food, but there was just so much, again, the standard American diet and even some of the standard diet recommendations are just not they're just not great. We ate a lot of red meat growing up, and we had some fast food here and there, even though we had some fruits and vegetables. But it really is important because, again, and we're looking at heart disease. Heart disease starts not only in childhood. In some cases, it can even, the first thickenings in the aorta can start in utero. So it really is important to make sure that parents and their kids both are getting a healthy diet and getting kids off to as good a start as they can. Now, I am not here to judge any parents because I do not actually have kids myself, and I've watched my friends and my family struggle. It is not easy to feed kids and be healthy, but the American Heart Association just came out with some really great new guidelines this past weekend, as I believe, right, Chuck? About,
Indeed.
yeah,
Indeed.
guiding kids to eating in ways that will help them be at less risk for obesity and be healthier adults down the road.
And before we get into those guidelines, I want to share actually a pretty profound statement that the AHA released along with those guidelines. It said, quote, "Although many children are born with an innate ability to stop eating when they are full, they are also influenced by the overall emotional atmosphere, including caregiver wishes and demands during meal times. If children under pressure feel that they need to eat in response to what the caregiver wants, it may be harder for them to listen to their individual internal cues to tell them when they are full." And that, Lee, maybe you had the similar experience, but I remember growing up going over to my grandparents' house, and my grandfather, he was like, "You have to finish every single morsel of food that is on your plate. You have to be a member of the Clean Plate Club because there are people who are less fortunate than we are who don't have any food. So you have to finish every little bite there." And I really think that, well-intentioned though Granddaddy may have been, he really kind of missed the mark there in pushing us past the point of satiety.
Yeah, and I think that's an issue for a lot of parents, it's certainly, oh gosh, especially with the grandparents, I think they just want to feed you. You know, that's a grandparent thing. Mine weren't like clean the plate. They just kept loading onto the plate. They're like, here, more food, as though like I was clearly not wasting away. Let's just put it that way. But it is very well intentioned. So I think parents are looking for ways like, what can they do that's going to help their kids learn their own hunger and fullness signals? Because you're right, if you're not careful, they're born with them, but you can teach them to override them. And sometimes it's even in more subtle ways. Again, it's like you're saying, it might be not that they're telling you have to clean your plate. It's not optimal, but also just because you see that it gives them delight if you're eating more. So you're eating more because you want to make that person happy. So, it can be a little fraught.
That reminds me of the time I was a little kid, and I don't know why this one stuck with me. My grandma, my dad's side, she brought me just this enormous plate of hot dogs, macaroni and cheese, and baked beans, right? Everything a growing boy needs. And she just stopped after she put the plate on the tray, and she said, Grandma loves to watch her boys eat. And that speaks to the heart
Yes.
of what it is that you were just saying. What is that
Absolutely.
fascination?
I think it's love. I think it's food is love. And unfortunately, the way that love is being expressed is actually detrimental. But I do believe that so much of this comes from a good place, which is why I'm so glad this information about, hey, how we can make food also be love and be good for the child at the same time, how we can bring all of that together, which is what the American Heart Association has gotten to with these new guidelines.
All right, well, let's talk about them. The first one is providing consistent timing for meals. Meal timing. As a dietitian, how important is this?
I think it's very important, especially for kids, because it gives them the sort of the feeling that, no matter what else is going on in the world, they have some stability. That's one thing, but also, hey, it gets their digestive tract primed and ready to go for when it's time to eat. So you're not going to get as much. I'm not going to say you're not going to get, but you probably won't get as much whining because the expectation is set. Hey, this is when dinner's happening. Food's going to come. So you can relax and play and do your thing, knowing that, hey, at this time, food's going to show up.
All right. The next guideline, and this one I think is a little bit tricky. It says allowing children to select what foods they want to eat from a selection of healthy choices. Now, couple things. One, you're giving the kids kind of free rein to pick things. And two, if a parent isn't quite familiar with what a healthy choice would be, this can really be kind of a slippery slope.
Yeah. So step 2, I think, is the most important one, is having parents know what qualifies as a healthy choice. Again, minimally processed, whole food, and plant-based are really great guidelines to go with. In terms of letting the child select, there's actually a child feeding expert named Ellen Satter, and she has a really nice, it was interesting to read these because I'm like, oh, this is very much in line with what she recommends, and what she actually deals more with picky eating, but also in feeding guidelines generally. She says that there's this division of responsibility, right? So that there are roles for the parents and roles for the kids, and parents have the role of the first 2 things we just said, the timing of the food and the type of the food. So when it's presented and what is presented, what the options are, and then kids have the responsibility of whether they may not even be hungry at all or how much. And this was interesting in these American Heart Association guidelines. When you go through and read them, even they mention that if your child is healthy weight and they are just not wanting what is on offer and they're not hungry, they will not die if they skip a meal. They will be okay. Now, if they're starting to skip multiple meals, or if they're underweight, or there's something else going on, that clearly doesn't apply. But if you have a healthy child who is just saying, I'm not hungry right now and I don't feel like eating, there's no need to force that child to eat. So again, the kid has the sort of the last say when it comes to how much and whether they're going to eat.
And I know I'm not a parent either, but one of the things that has been discussed on the show frequently with those who are, and they have children at home, is that if they get the child involved in the cooking process and preparing the meal, they're going to be more inclined to be enthused about whatever is on the plate. So if they do put together a healthy meal and they're helping to prepare it, I think that, letting them choose at that point to eat healthy would become a little bit easier.
Oh yeah, if we all like things better if we make them. Like, I made this. You see the art that kids bring to the fridge. I've definitely seen that, with my nieces and nephews too. They get involved, and all of a sudden that salad is much more appealing if they were the one that chopped up the cucumbers with the kid's safe knife and lots of supervision. Trust me, we are not turning small children free with knives.
All right, now, good tip. That one didn't make the AHA guidelines, but that is still an important tip. Next one, serving healthy foods or new foods alongside foods that they already enjoy. This, I think, can be really beneficial.
Yeah, and this one of the things in these guidelines they talked about were like, hey, if there's a preferred dip that your kid likes, and you want to try a new vegetable with them, you just put the new vegetable on the plate with the dip they already like. So, and again, with the new foods, you may have to reintroduce them multiple times. Although this can backfire a little bit because I definitely watched my nieces a couple years ago when we were on our family vacation. They got the salad and that was great, and they really liked the dressing, but then they would like take the spinach leaf and smear it in the dressing on the plate and just lick the dressing off the spinach leaf and go back again. But they did eventually eat the spinach leaf. So, it all works out. But yes, having something familiar along, on a familiar plate of food, it's just one new thing on it, particularly when toddlers are in that developmental phase of like, it's new, I don't want to eat it. That can help.
And this next one is kind of leading by example. It says regularly eating new healthy foods while eating with the child and demonstrating the enjoyment of said food.
Oh, this is so critical because I think more than anyone else, kids are like laser radar focused on hypocrisy. They will know. They really are. If they see you saying one thing and doing something else, and because kids don't so much have a filter, they will often just call you out on it too. So this is so important because they really do. And again, these are especially important for younger kids. Like while your kid is still in this phase of wanting to be like you instead of being too cool to hang out with you, wow, live that up, model all the healthy behaviors you can. And again, if they see that, this will be normalized for them. So when they go out into the world, the normal thing to do will be to eat healthy foods.
This one kind of goes back to what it was that we were talking about just a minute ago. It says paying attention to a child's verbal and nonverbal hunger and fullness cues.
Yeah, so this is basically about not being a food pusher. And it all comes back to if the kid's not that hungry or doesn't want to eat, the clean plate club. Like I understand, again, all these impulses come from a good place. You don't want to waste food. There are people who don't have enough elsewhere, and so you should appreciate it. But and they do. But if you are pushing food to a point that the child eats it because they don't want you to be upset, then you've just taught them to ignore their own hunger and fullness cues. And you can also watch, especially for very little children, like if you're feeding them, toddlers and sort of in between the infant toddler stage, if they're starting to put their hands up a little bit or lean back or be more distracted than usual. I know kids, when you're eating them, sometimes you got the spoon and they're like, but if they're really in that place, then those are cues that you can get to before they kind of start to squall at the table, just to be like, oh, they might be done now. And dialing into that can help them learn how to dial into it down the road.
And the last one is along the same lines. It says explicitly avoid pressuring children to eat more than they wish. And that goes back to exactly what Granddaddy used to do with my brother and I, is like clean plate club or else you're not leaving the table. And so that was a real issue. And I think back to, this is more than 30 years ago at this point that we were having those conversations, and they really stuck with me to this day. I remember them so vividly. And then obviously we know how my weight increased over time. I really think that pressure is part of what can drive a child to become obese, especially if they're not making those healthy food choices.
Oh, yeah, again, as a kid that was a little more sensitive, I think, than most to the things going on around me, anything I knew that would make my parents happy was something that, now clearly I didn't always do it because I'm sure I made them crazy a lot, but I was very dialed into doing the things that I thought would make the people around me happy. And particularly, my parents weren't so much on the food pushing, but my grandparents, bless their hearts, they were. And of course, being grandparents, they were maybe more indulgent than my parents. So I was more than happy to oblige, usually when I was at my grandparents' house. But it does, if that's a regular influence on a child, then they are going to start learning that, hey, food can be used for purposes other than hunger. And of course that's true, but we really want to teach them that hunger is the primary. We're trying to take care of our body's needs and keep ourselves healthy, and then be done when that has been satisfied.
And then to take it a step further, for me, food addiction became a real struggle just a few years after those conversations began. And it also kind of strikes me that the food that Granddaddy was telling us to finish up was not the healthiest of food at all. We talked about the hot dogs and baked beans and macaroni and cheese, none of which in my book exactly qualify as a health food.
No, but even so, it's not as much an issue with obesity, but it can be with picky eating and other kinds of eating issues. Even trying to force kids to eat the healthy foods, it's just not a good idea. Anything that's, a very controlling feeding practice, it can be detrimental to the child learning to do these things for themselves because they want to. So this is, one of those areas where pushing food, certainly the unhealthy foods, but even the healthy foods, again, you want to offer options, and then it's to the kid. You've given them multiple healthy options. It's on them to pick, within reason. Obviously, if they decide they're only eating one food for a month, you might want to address that, but it's their choice within this range of good options that they're given.
Something cool, though, kind of a silver lining right now in this pandemic is I would think that with so many of us still quarantining, spending a lot of time at home, because we're home so much with our family, it might be even a little bit easier to begin implementing some of these new guidelines right now.
Bingo. Just like we mentioned with eating the sort of heart healthy foods, now is a great time to start doing, if you haven't regularly had family meal times. You literally can't get away from your family right now. So now is actually the best possible time to start a new habit that involves being at home with your family, because you have no choice. So it's going to reinforce itself. And then hopefully at least that will help stick. So it's almost like we've all been given this practice field, which we didn't have a choice about. But while it's here, we may as well take advantage of it and really get some of these healthy habits established so that when we ease back into normal life, part of our new normal life becomes these healthier eating habits, like having a family dinner.
And it sounds to me, just from your dietitian expertise and your own experience, you're really on board with what it is that the AHA is suggesting right now.
Oh gosh, yeah. And again, I don't have children myself, so I can only imagine what parents are trying to go through. And I know that I'm sure there are parents hearing me say, like, family dinner right now, are you kidding me? I need a break from my kids. Not that parents would ever need a break from their kids, because kids are the best. But I can understand that they may be pushing back against this. But yeah, there will never be, as far as I can tell, a better time to really jump in and start doing this. Let's get those healthy habits established.
Amen to that. Lee, thank you very much. And you who is watching right now, if you actually want to schedule an appointment, meet with Lee for an analysis of your own diet, you can do that at the Barnard Medical Center. You can do that at barnardmedical.org to make that appointment, or pick up the phone. Do it old school, 202-527-7500. Telehealth visits are available. Now, here's the cool thing about telehealth. You don't even have to leave the house, right? This is, I've said it before, I will say it again and again and again. This is the 21st century doctor's house call. There's no exam room that you have to go to. The dietitians, the doctors, they come to you. It really is. It's like an appointment via Skype. So
you can wear your jammies. Just saying. No judgment.
Have you actually had patients wear their jammies during the consultation?
Jammies. I've seen some very athleisure, some very more leisure, less and more easier. But no jammies yet. But again, you want to wear your jammies, you wear your jammies.
Do it. A lot of people want to clean up their diet right now during the pandemic. Make sure that everything is as good as possible.
Yeah, there's a sort of push-pull between people who are sort of and we all are dealing with the urge to kind of stress eat a little bit, and also boredom eat. But yeah, a lot of people are using this as training wheels, and that's exactly what the situation is, because you don't have as much access to the addictive foods, and you don't have all those outside pressures to the extent you normally would. So yeah, it's actually a pretty good time to be a dietitian and to be working with a dietitian.
I think it's always a good time to be a dietitian, Lee.
Clearly.
You are doing some important work here. New patients right now are being accepted if you live in California, New York, Washington, D.C., Maryland, Virginia, Missouri, Arizona, Colorado, Massachusetts, and Lee, your home of?
Well, Maryland, but my family's home of Kentucky.
Work with me here, Crosby. Work with me, please. So Kentucky now as well. So if you live in any of those states or locations, just make that appointment today. barnardmedical.org. 202-527-7500 is the number to call. And Lee, thank you very much for your time today. It is always a blast when you join us here on the Exam Room.
Thanks for having me, Chuck.
All right. Tomorrow on the show, we are going to be joined by Gwen. He is navigating the challenges of running a whole food, plant-based restaurant right during the pandemic. But instead of folding up shop, she's expanding actually and creating a new kind of business, creating organic, reusable masks for first responders on the front line right here in the Washington, D.C. area. Very cool. And if that wasn't enough, She's also created one of the nation's first virtual Veg Fests. Last month, there was supposed to be the Fairfax Veg Fest right outside of Washington, D.C. The pandemic kind of spoiled all of those plans, but rather than cancel it altogether, she said, oh, no, no, no. Dr. Barnard, can you come online? Dr. Michael Greger, can you come online? Dr. Baxter Montgomery, can you come online? Dr. T. Colin Campbell, can you come online? All of them said yes. So there was this wonderful, amazing day-long online Veg Fest, chock full of information. We featured so many of those interviews, as a matter of fact, right here on the exam room. This is truly a remarkable woman who will be sharing her story and some inspiration as we all continue to go through this together. Just a phenomenal, phenomenal human being. And also on the show tomorrow, Dr. Barnard will be back to answer your questions. When we open up the doctor's mailbag, we're going to be doing one of those big, long Q&A sessions. He's going to be joined by Dr. Vanita Rahman as well. So if you have a question, nutrition related, COVID-19 related, whatever is on your mind, go ahead and post that in the comment section right now, or you can find us on social media, Twitter and Instagram, at Chuck Carroll, WLC, at PCRM, and at Physicians Committee, also on Instagram. All over the place. Just make sure that when you send us those questions, you use the hashtag Exam Room Podcast. And lastly, if you could use a little bit more inspiration right this very second, head over to Apple Podcast and look for the Exam Room Podcast by the Physicians Committee. Hit that subscribe button, because on today's show is a phenomenal interview with Bruce and Mindy Milray. 9 years ago, Bruce was diagnosed with cancer. And then he began studying. He did not want to become a statistic. He began studying and learning all about nutrition. And so what began by opening a book in the library has spawned into this amazing cross-country epic journey in an enormous RV that is literally covered front to back with big old pictures of fruits and vegetables. It is called the Wellness Wagon, and I promise you, you can see this thing from outer space. And what they do is they go around the country and they teach people the benefits of eating a plant-based diet, and they use Bruce's own story as inspiration. And so we're going to chat with them, see how things are going. Mindy also has a great new book out about how things are going after a cancer diagnosis in the most romantic way. She's got some tips there. It's just a great interview through and through. These are phenomenal human beings. So head over to the Exam Room Podcast on Apple Podcast, hit that subscribe button, and leave a 5-star rating if you would be so kind. But for today's show, that's all the time that we have right now. My thanks again to dietitian Lee Crosby. And for everyone here at the Physicians Committee, I am the weight loss champion. Thank you so very much for joining us. And remember, eat something green and keep it clean. We'll talk to you tomorrow.